Chapter 9 discusses writing project reports. We begin with a general overview of what any reader of any report would like to see. Members of the audience should be able to relate to each of these items fairly well. Readers want things to be kept simple. They don't want to have to figure out what the writer is trying to say. Therefore, avoid convoluted and creative sentences and paragraphs. Also, avoid jargon and acronyms. If you know your reader, you should know what they want to read. Provide it to them and show them where it is in the report. Readers want what they want fairly quickly. Often, readers will want to read only some part of a report. Writers should help readers skip to those parts of the report they are interested in. In addition, headings, bullets, use of boldface and underlining will help readers skim the report to find what they want quickly. Project leaders should have developed good relationships with their principal stakeholders early in the project. Even so, how well a project report is written will reflect on the project and its leader. Let's discuss the characteristics of decision makers. Decision makers are those who have the authority to make the important decisions about the project and what follows from it. Decision makers are busy people who have to juggle many different projects and interests at the same time. Your project is likely only to be one of many issues on his or her mind. Decision makers are paid to make things happen. They are typically very action-oriented people. What they want from a report is the information they need to make decisions and move ahead. Because decision makers are juggling many different things, they often need to be reminded about the project and its major issues. A brief summary of the project is enough to fulfill this need. Decision makers are interested in the big picture and how your project might fit into it. They will leave technical details to their advisors. They want to know the most important findings and issues uncovered by the project. Different levels of detail means that broad issues and findings are presented first. If more is wanted, the report provides it somewhere. If more is not wanted, the reader can simply skip to the next major issue or finding. As previously mentioned, we should avoid technical jargon. Some decision makers are often well versed in the jargon of the project's area of work. Often they are not. Writers who use jargon are often simply writing for themselves. Explain what decision makers need to know in words they understand. This does not suggest that project leaders write down to decision makers just to use words that they can understand. Projects often work in technical areas unfamiliar to those who ultimately have to make decisions about them. The report must present what needs to be said in a way that is clearly understood by the non-technical folks. Again, this is not to say the report is written down to the decision maker. It is to say that it is the writer's responsibility to communicate clearly with the decision maker. Because projects are often outside the expertise of the decision maker, decision makers often turn to experts to advise them about the technical issues involved in the project and written up in the report. The expert advisor wants to have confidence in your expertise, and I think you want the same thing. Experts will read the main body of the report, but will also look at other cues and information to assess your expertise and how well you applied it. Make sure that you include references in your report. Unlike the decision maker, expert advisors want to see the details and the facts and figures to support your product and services. Experts are aware of all of the important technical issues involved in the project. They want to see that you are aware and you have attended to them as well. Quite often, projects require or point to actions that need to be taken. Even when project personnel implement many aspects of a project's output, most often other users need to take over and continue the work. Project reports can help them as well. Often things like a user manual, implementation guidelines, and the like are included as part of the project. Whatever is needed to implement the project and use the project's output. Users and implementers are important stakeholders in any project. Project leaders should attend to their information, product, and service needs. Most of their information needs should be addressed in some way by the project report. The needs of users and implementers need to be included in the scope of the work to be done, the time demands the work will require, and the cost associated with that work. Project reports come in all shapes and sizes, informal to formal, small to large, proposals, and end-of-project reports. Our focus is on the formal end-of-project report. Project reports are usually technical documents. They report on the progress or result of a project. They may well include information contracted for the project, such as technical manuals and cost analysis. The concept is to get information the principal stakeholders want across in as clear and concise a manner as possible. Make sure to include major sections in the formal final report. For purposes of presentation, the final report is broken down into 3 major sections: the front end, the body, and the back end. Let's talk about the front end first. This includes a cover page to executive summary. These are the first pages of any report. The first pages make the first impression of a report. The body of the report includes the introduction and references and bibliography. This is where the meat of the report lies. Here is where the project's results are presented. And the back end of the report includes all the technical support. Let's spend some time talking about each section in detail. The cover page is pretty straightforward. It includes a clear, concise, descriptive title. The emphasis here is on clear and concise, and actually descriptive. Clear in terms that anyone reading it would know what it says. Concise in terms of using as few words as possible while still being descriptive in terms that anyone reading the title will know what the report is about. The authors of the report often include the team or the host organization. We want to make sure we have a date on the report, as well notes about drafts and or revisions. This is a practice writers will grow to love, especially if a report is being produced by a team. A short description of the project might be included, a few of the most important findings and recommendations, a statement that the project has delivered what it was intended to, acknowledgement of the help of relevant stakeholders, and finally, offers of future help may be included as well. The usefulness of a table of contents is often overlooked. Whenever anyone wants to know what is in a book, they immediately turn to the table of contents after assessing its title. The table of contents lays out the major sections and subsections of the report. The more clear, concise, and descriptive are the headings and the subheadings in the body of a report, the easier it will be for the reader to know what is in the report and where it is. This will help the reader to skip to those parts of the most interest to him or her. The table of contents provides readers with a map of the contents and how to get to where they want to go. It also lists any tables or illustrations. It is hard to overstate the importance of the executive summary. It may be the only thing decision makers read to make decisions about your project. Although only parts of the rest of the report may be read, almost always everyone reads the executive summary. The executive should be as terse and short as possible. A single page is desirable. Executive summaries should cover the following: a brief introductory description of the project. This is to reacquaint the reader with what the project was all about. The project's mission statement should suffice, and a very brief scope statement listing the major deliverables. This can usually be written in a short paragraph. Second is a summary of the project's most important findings, deliverables, and recommendations. The emphasis here is on summary and most important. Simply summarize in a terse statement what a decision maker would want to know. Third, make sure it's designed for the decision maker. This is why it's called an executive summary. Recall that decision makers are busy, action-oriented people who need to make decisions as soon as possible. Keep the executive summary aimed at these objectives. Let's talk about what an executive summary is not. It almost never describes how something was done. If technical procedures are important, the phrase "using prescribed procedures" will most often suffice for an executive summary. It is almost never a narrative. It never tells a story, never states that something is important, and it never brags or tries to market or advertise. The summary's content should do that by being impressive as it is. Many people skim the introduction of a report, but the introduction should cover at least 2 items: a project overview and scope statement. The project overview is a brief statement of what the project was all about. A good way to begin would be to say, the purpose of this project was to. The overview statement in the executive summary may be repeated here with more elaboration, noting for whom the project was done and any other major project parameters. The scope statement is a statement of the project's main objectives and deliverables. This is a formal listing of what the project was supposed to accomplish in very concrete terms. Often the main body of the report will be organized to reflect the deliverables given in the project statement. If so, the scope statement itself can serve as an overview of the report. If the report does not conform to the scope statement, a short overview of content is appropriate. It is important to remember that the body of a project report is really an extended summary of the major findings, products, and/or services provided to the client. Usually, how deliverables were produced is not the subject or extended discussion in the body of the report. If certain procedures need to be followed as a result of typical practice, the body of the report should simply state that they were followed and, if the client wishes, summarize them. Narratives of who did what are never included. A fair amount of attention needs to be given to just what should be presented in the body of the report and when it should be presented. This macro structure is most often tied to the project output itself. Sometimes the process of the project will dictate the structure. Sometimes the deliverable itself will dictate the structure. In any event, the body breakout should make sense and one section should follow logically from the next. One way of assessing the logic and coherence of a report is to look at the table of contents. A table of contents is really the outline of the report. It should make sense to the principal readership. Reports are rarely fun to read. Readers should be helped in all ways to search out and find those elements of the report most important to them. There are a number of ways to do this. Include bold, descriptive headings and subheadings. Use bulleted lists. Bullets can quickly convey a great deal of information. Care must be taken that the reader will understand what the elements in the listing are. If items need explanation, the listing itself can be underlined or made bold. The saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words is true. However, it needs to be presented very well. The actual word content of a report should be very clear to the average reader. As we mentioned several times already, avoid jargon and acronyms. Conclusions and recommendations should command as much attention as the executive summary. Often, decision makers move from the executive summary to this section of the report. Novice writers often make the mistake of approaching the conclusions section as if it were a summary of the report itself. They tend to think that conclusions of a project report is a simple summary or closing statement, but they are not. Conclusions in the project reports are conclusions about the project itself. They are more like considered judgments made about the project. Those who have conducted a project are, in many ways, the experts in whatever the project was supposed to do or produce. The conclusions section should conclude the wisdom of their experience with the project. Also include the actions you recommend for the future. Recommendations should be targeted to the decision maker, such as writers should make sure the recommendations are as concrete as possible. Because decision makers need to be action-oriented, recommendations that facilitate them taking action are of most value to them. References complete the body of the report. All sources and materials cited in the report itself should have full reference for them. Often in the course of a project, important sources and materials are found that would be of benefit for a client. This may well be the case, in particular for end users and implementers of a project. There are a number of standard ways of structuring a reference section. I suggest you follow the APA manual for references.